"You lying, cheating bastard!" The words hit me like a truck as I stood frozen in the doorway of Derek's study, my heart pounding in my ears. There he was, the man I had loved and sacrificed everything for, frantically buttoning his shirt as a scantily clad woman scrambled to gather her clothes. "Lena, I can explain," he stammered, his eyes wide with panic. But there was no explanation that could undo what I had just witnessed. Years of neglect, dismissal, and disrespect from him and his children came flooding back in that single sickening moment. "Don't bother," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "I want a divorce." The woman, clearly mortified, hurried past me without a word. Derek reached out a hand, but I recoiled as if he had struck me. "Lena, please, let's talk about this," he pleaded, his bravado crumbling. "Talk? You want to talk now, after all these years of treating me like a doormat?" I laughed bitterly. "No, Derek, the talking is over." I stormed out, my mind racing. How could I have been so blind, so foolish to endure his infidelity and take his disdain lying down? A familiar rage bubbled up within me, one I had suppressed for far too long. As I paced the living room, fists clenched, a new resolve took shape. Leaving Derek wasn't enough. He and his spoiled brats needed to understand the true depth of my sacrifice, to feel the sting of my absence in a way that would shake them to their core. The sound of footsteps made me spin around. Eli and Mia stood frozen, eyes wide with shock and confusion. "Mom?" Mia's voice was small, scared. "What's going on?" For a moment I almost relented, the old instinct to comfort and protect them rising up. But I squashed it down, letting the righteous anger fuel me. "Your precious father has been cheating on me," I said coldly. "And you two have been treating me like garbage for years, just like him." Eli opened his mouth, but I cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Save it. I'm done being your punching bag, your servant, your doormat. From now on, you'll all get a taste of what life is like without me around to clean up your messes." With that, I turned and stormed out, leaving them to grapple with the fallout of their crumbling facade of a family. No more Mrs. Nice Stepmom. It was time for revenge. The week after I caught Derek cheating was a whirlwind. I met with a divorce lawyer, set up a separate bank account, and started meticulously documenting Derek's misdeeds as leverage. But that was just the beginning of my revenge. It started small, little digs here and there when we were out with friends, subtle hints that planted seeds of doubt about Derek's character. A raised eyebrow when he showed off his newest expensive toy, a meaningful look when he complained about me spending too much. "Must be tough keeping up with all Derek's vices," I said sweetly to his friend Jake at a backyard barbecue one afternoon. Derek's head whipped around, his eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged innocently. "Just seems like you're always buying new toys to overcompensate for, well, you know." I let the implication hang in the air. Jake shifted uncomfortably, but the other guys guffawed. Derek's cheeks burned red. "You're way out of line," he hissed, grabbing my arm, but I jerked it away, unflinching. "Am I?" I smiled serenely. "At least I'm not stepping out on my wife with some cheap floozy." The laughter died in an instant. Derek's friends exchanged awkward glances, suddenly aware that the perfect life he'd sold them was a sham. Score one for me. At home, I adopted a similar tactic, making every interaction a passive-aggressive dig at Derek's ego and authority. When he ordered Eli to mow the lawn, I'd sigh heavily. Maybe your father should do it himself for once, instead of lounging around all day like a deadbeat. Eli's eyes would go wide, but he stayed silent, clearly sensing the shifting power dynamic. With Mia, I planted the idea of getting a part-time job and her own car, giving her an excuse to be out of the house more. The less time she and Eli spent under Derek's influence, the better for me. Of course, Derek saw what I was doing and confronted me in a rage more than once. "You're poisoning my own damn kids against me," he shouted one night, looming over me with clenched fists. I met his gaze levelly, refusing to cower. "I'm just opening their eyes to what a spineless, cheating loser you really are. They deserve better than you." His face purpled, but he didn't dare lay a hand on me. Not with the damning evidence I had stacked up. With a wordless snarl, he turned and stormed out. Every day, I chipped away at his ego, his standing, his relationships. I was determined to strip away every facade he'd hidden behind until he had nothing left. Only then would my revenge be complete, and that cheating bastard would finally understand just how meaningless his life was without me in it. With my revenge plan in motion, I knew I needed to secure my financial freedom from Derek. I didn't just want to leave him. I wanted to bleed him dry and strip away every advantage he thought he had over me. Step one was getting a job. Through a friend, I landed a position at a real estate company as an administrative assistant. It was humble work, but I didn't care. What mattered was having my own income stream. "You're making a huge mistake," Derek sneered when I told him. "Who's going to cook and clean and run this household?" I smiled thinly. "Gee, I don't know, Derek. Maybe try doing it yourself for once, instead of treating me like an unpaid maid." His face mottled with rage, but I didn't give him a chance to respond, turning and walking away. I was done justifying myself to him. At work, I diligently saved every penny, setting up my own retirement account and trading accounts behind Derek's back. The broker I used taught me about investing, stocks, cryptocurrencies. I devoured it all like a starving woman. Within months, my skills and savings had grown significantly. I also traded fashion and hairstyle advice with the younger women at work, rediscovering my sense of confidence and style that Derek had spent years dismissing as frivolous. At home, I hit the gym hard, shedding pounds and regaining my figure. Derek noticed, of course, his eyes lingering in a way they hadn't for years. "See something you like?" I'd taunt with a smirk, watching him squirm. Turnabout was fair play after his affairs. My new attitude and independence enraged him, like I was destroying his carefully constructed reality. We fought constantly, locked in a passive-aggressive war of attrition. "You're dead to me?" he snarled one night after I announced I'd be going on a weekend trip to Vegas with friends from work. "You're not my wife anymore." I laughed in his face. "I haven't been your wife for a long time, Derek. You checked out of this marriage years ago to chase anything in a skirt." His jaw clenched, but I could see the fear flickering in his eyes as he realized just how much I'd changed. Good. I wanted him to be afraid. With my own accounts paid up and assets secured, I moved Fade out of the master bedroom, not even caring when Derek instantly brought one of his flings to defile the bed we'd once shared. Let him have his tawdry affairs. Pretty soon, he'd have nothing and no one left. My scheme was all coming together. I was breaking free, getting stronger every day, while Derek's sad, pathetic existence crumbled around him. His downfall was inevitable, and I wouldn't stop until he understood the hell he'd put me through all these years. He would learn that karma doesn't mess around. With every week that passed, Derek grew more paranoid and unhinged. I could see the fear flickering behind his eyes as he watched me become more self-assured and in control. His anger issues were getting worse, too. Simple things would set him off into explosive rages that even had Eli and Mia walking on eggshells around him. I just smiled serenely whenever he tried to intimidate me with his shouting and loomed over me like a raging bull. "Getting angry only makes you look pathetic," I'd say calmly. "Maybe instead of throwing a tantrum, you should try being a better husband and father for once." That would make him see red. But he knew better than to ever lay a hand on me, not with the mountains of evidence I had compiled detailing every sordid affair, every cruel outburst, every selfish purchase made at the expense of our family's well-being. Meanwhile, I continued planting seeds about his bad behavior with our friends and his co-workers. The once respected Derek was rapidly becoming a social pariah, as the veil was lifted on his true, ugly nature. "Geez, Derek seems really on edge lately," I mentioned casually to his friend Marcus one day. "I'm worried about how much he's drinking and gambling, too." Marcus's eyes went wide as realization dawned. "Wait, he's not." I shrugged, feigning innocence. "Hey, I'm just saying what I've observed." Word spread quickly, and soon hushed whispers and sidelong glances followed Derek wherever he went. I could see the shame and anger eating him alive. At home, Eli and Mia witnessed his meltdowns firsthand, the image of the once powerful patriarch crumbling. Mia in particular was clearly having doubts about siding with her father over me. Do you think Dad has a problem?" she asked me hesitantly one day after he'd stormed out in a drunken rage. I shrugged. "What do you think, sweetie? You see how he yells and destroys things over every little thing." She bit her lip, recognizing the toxic truth her mother had enabled for years. Another tiny fracture in the false family image Derek had manufactured. With each passing day, I systematically dismantled the facade until Derek was left an exposed, raging, insecure mess of a man. All his privilege, bravado, and affairs amounted to nothing without the stable home life I provided. "You're ruining my life," he screamed at me during one of his tantrums, tears of anger and fear stinging his eyes. I simply stared at him, utterly unmoved. "I'm just exposing what was already there, Derek. Who ruined whose life?" He had nothing. No friends, no family loyalty, just a drunken, cheating, abusive shell of a man drowning in the consequences of his own actions, and I was just getting started on my revenge. The beginning of the end for Derek started with an anonymous email. I'll never forget the look of shock and horror on his face when he opened it at the kitchen table one morning. His mouth hung open, his face turning beet red as he read the contents. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked innocently as I sipped my coffee. He looked up at me with narrowed, accusing eyes. The email had contained evidence, pictures and details of one of his many affairs. "You," he growled, fists clenched on the table. "You did this, you vindictive bitch!" I simply raised an eyebrow. "Did what? If you're referring to your extracurricular activities, that's on you, not me. This is going too far," he shouted, leaping up and towering over me. "You're trying to ruin my life." A tiny spark of fear flickered through me at his rage, but I pushed it down. I was in control now. "Your life was already a train wreck, Derek," I replied calmly. "I'm just pulling back the curtain you've hidden behind for years." Before he could respond, Eli and Mia came shuffling in, roused by the yelling. "What's going on?" Eli asked warily, sensing the tension. Derek opened his mouth, but I beat him to it, sliding the email toward them with a resigned sigh. "It seems your father's indiscretions have been exposed. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." They read in stunned silence as Derek erupted again. "Don't you dare try to play the victim here," he raged at me. "You've been scheming and manipulating this whole time." Mia looked up at him, her expression one of revulsion and sadness. Is this true, Dad?" He opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish. Eli just shook his head slowly, unable to meet Derek's eye. Like dominoes, the carefully constructed lies Derek had erected came tumbling down one by one after that. More emails and exposures followed from anonymous sources, i.e. me. The cheating, the cruelty toward me, the verbal and emotional abuse. All of it was dragged into the glaring light for everyone in our social circle to see. Derek's life and reputation were in ruinous freefall. I'll never forget the night it all finally shattered. We were at a neighborhood party, and Derek had checked out hours before, drunk and morose. When I arrived home later, I found both kids sitting in the living room in stunned silence. Derek's dress shirt and tie were in crumpled heaps on the floor next to broken glass and spilled liquor. "We know everything, Mom," Eli said in a hollow voice. "He told us what he did to you, what he put you through." I drew in a shaky breath, my vengeful elation dimming at the sight of their devastated expressions. I'd won, but at what cost? Mia looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why did you stay with him for so long? Why put up with that?" Suddenly, all the years of suppressed hurt, sacrifice, and quiet resilience came rushing to the surface. I crossed the room and pulled them both into a fierce hug, surprising them. "Because you two were the only good things he gave me," I murmured, my own eyes stinging. "And some small part of me kept hoping your father would change, that he'd find his way back." We stayed like that for a long moment, drawing strength from one another. United at long last by the dissolution of the toxic family facade and the truth we could no longer avoid. From the ashes of Derek's self-destruction, a new path forward was being forged. And this time, I wouldn't be the one tiptoeing meekly along. In the days after my carefully constructed unraveling of Derek's life, an eerie calm settled over the household. We walked on eggshells around each other, the truth of his despicable behavior hanging like a dark cloud. Derek stayed mostly holed up, drinking himself into an angry stupor. Every time he emerged, his eyes would burn with hatred and resentment toward me. But I simply met his glares with an impassive stare, utterly unbowed. The kids avoided him too, choosing to spend more time out of the house. In those tense moments when our paths crossed, I could see the turmoil and disgust they now regarded their father with. It was during one of Derek's benders that everything finally came to a head. I was cleaning up shattered glass and puddles of liquor in the living room when he came stumbling down the hallway, wild-eyed and reeking of booze. "You," he slurred, jabbing an accusing finger at me. "This is all you're doing, you manipulative harpy." I turned to face him, arms crossed as I took in his pathetic, disheveled appearance. "Is it? I seem to recall a certain someone being an abusive, cheating scumbag for years. I just exposed you for who you truly are." His face purpled with drunken rage, and he lunged at me with a scream. I stood my ground as he got in my face, screaming insults and threats through hot, whiskey-laced gusts of breath. "I'll destroy you, you vindictive bitch! You won't get a single cent from me!" Unflinching, I stared him down, my voice a low hiss. "You can rant and rave all you want, Derek, but everything I've done is based on cold but hard evidence of your vile behavior, evidence I'll happily take to court if you push me." That gave him pause, and he recoiled slightly as realization dawned through the drunken haze. During our unraveling, I had carefully documented every abusive outburst, every affair, every cruelty toward me and the kids. I had it all: phone records, photos, recordings, you name it. He knew he was trapped, his decade-long facade crushed to rubble by his own abhorrent choices. What do you want?" he mumbled, shoulders slumping in defeat. Seizing my moment, I laid it all out, the divorce terms, the financial settlement, everything. By the time I finished, he gaped at me in stunned outrage. "You're taking everything, the house, the cars, my retirement, all of it." I shrugged coldly. "You've earned every hardship coming your way. Maybe next time, try being a better husband and father instead of a lying, abusive piece of garbage." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him sputtering in impotent rage. He realized then that he was powerless, that I held all the cards. His privileged life was over. In the weeks that followed, Derek sought to fight the divorce terms, but I simply produced the mountain of evidence, laying bare the disgusting truth of his misdeeds. His lawyer finally conceded that he had no choice but to accept my terms, unless he wanted to risk potential criminal charges. Finally, bitterly, Derek capitulated and signed the divorce papers, sealing his fate as a broke, disgraced social pariah. Meanwhile, I would emerge with the house, the assets, and substantial spousal support, everything needed to start my new life of freedom and independence. The smug, entitled asshole I had endured for over a decade got his rightful karmic comeuppance at long last. He would have nothing but his drunken misery and loneliness to sustain him. As for me, my shackles were finally released. It was time to shed the dead weight and embrace the bright future of prosperity and respect I so richly deserved. The day I finally moved out of that house, the house Derek had lorded over and belittled me in for so many years, was one of the most satisfying of my life. I'll never forget the snarl of impotent rage on his face as I directed the movers, boxing up my belongings to start my new life. The kids both hovered nearby, clearly torn between siding with their defeated father and the mother they'd only just begun to understand and respect. "This isn't over," Derek spat, clenching his fists as I turned to go. "Not by a long shot." I fixed him with a look of weary disdain. "Please, we both know you have no recourse after the filth I uncovered about you. Don't make empty threats, it's unseemly." His jaw worked furiously as he struggled not to erupt into another embarrassing display. With a last contemptuous sneer, I turned and followed the movers out, leaving him to stew in his fading alpha male dominance. My new home was a cute little bungalow in a quieter neighborhood, a far cry from the gaudy, ostentatious McMansion Derek had always insisted on. But it was mine, paid for with the hefty settlement I'd taken him for. As the movers unloaded the last boxes, I surveyed my new kingdom with immense satisfaction. It was just the start of building a life free from Derek's toxic control and ingratitude. Using the money I diligently saved up from my job and investments, I also opened a small day spa in a trendy part of town, a place of tranquility and self-care, things Derek had always mocked and denied me over the years in favor of his own pleasures. The grand opening was a hit, with friends and neighbors coming out to admire the chic, minimalist vibe and praising my ingenuity and resolve to forge this new path. I basked in the warm admiration, charming the crowds and networking nonstop to ensure my business's success. Derek, of course, tried to sabotage things wherever he could. He went through phases of bitter silence, drunken shouting matches, or underhanded scheming to turn the kids against me. But they both remained united in distancing themselves from his toxic behavior. "You get what you deserve, asshole," Eli said coldly when Derek ranted about being abandoned during one particularly low moment. Maybe if you hadn't treated Mom like garbage, she wouldn't have left. He and Mia would come by my spa regularly, seeking the nurturing feminine energy and advice their father had deprived them of. In those moments, I saw so much potential in them to rise above the ugliness of Derek's influence. Slowly but surely, I excised his lingering poison from all our lives. The ultimate insult, however, came when Derek was forced to move out of the big house himself after failing to keep up with the mortgage and utility payments. I happened to be at my business when I saw the moving truck pulling up to load his belongings into storage. "This doesn't have to be goodbye," he said in a rare moment of sobriety, eyeing me with a pathetic look that would have once engendered pity. Instead, I felt only contempt. "Don't delude yourself. This is exactly what you deserve after sacrificing everything to feed your ego and vices. No more chances." With that, I turned and went back inside, relishing the symbolism of leaving him out in the cold, alone and discarded like the trash he truly was. Derek's misery and downward spiral consumed him after that. I didn't gloat or revel in it. I simply resolved to keep moving forward, savoring my newfound freedom and success. Any lingering feelings of love or need for that troll of a man were long extinguished. I was finally in full control of my own destiny, beholden to no one. And that feeling of power was intoxicating and well-earned after my years of sacrifice. The karmic circle was complete. The only thing left was to embrace my glorious new chapter, free of toxicity or turmoil. In the months that followed my liberation from Derek's toxic grip, my life blossomed in ways I had only dreamed of. The spa I opened became a booming success, and my personal investments continued to grow. I went from the downtrodden, disrespected wife to an independent, respected entrepreneur and mentor to other women looking to escape the shackles of abusive or controlling relationships. My friends marveled at how I'd finally found the courage and strength to bet on myself. "Girl, you are glowing," my friend Carly exclaimed one evening after a yoga class at the spa. "This new life looks amazing on you." I smiled serenely as I sampled the herbal tea I was thinking of adding to the spa menu. "It's true freedom," I said simply. After being trapped under Derek's thumb and disrespect for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like. Now I'll never let anyone make me feel so small again. She squeezed my hand supportively. Like many in my social circle, she'd been horrified by the sordid truth about my marriage once it finally came to light. "You're damn right. That loser never deserved you in the first place." As for Derek, my former tormentor rapidly became a tragic footnote, a disgraceful pariah, banished from every social circle we used to run in. Whispers and finger-pointing followed him wherever he went. The money I had taken in the divorce dwindled fast, thanks to his reckless spending and vices. Within a year, he was living in a dingy apartment, jobless, with all his designer toys and mansions repossessed to pay off debts and legal fees. I'll never forget the day I ran into him at the grocery store, hair and clothes disheveled, wild-eyed and reeking of alcohol. He made a move toward me like he wanted to speak, but something in my cool stare must have warned him off. With a chilling glare of pure loathing, he turned and skulked away, the once mighty alpha male now utterly diminished and disgraced. I felt not an ounce of pity, only the satisfied sense that true karma had been served. In stark contrast, my relationship with Eli and Mia slowly began to heal and strengthen. As Derek spiraled deeper into his pathetic hole of drunken self-pity, they gravitated more toward me and my new opportunity for peace and reinvention. They saw how running my own business allowed me to regain my confidence and sense of purpose after years of mistreatment. And in turn, I nurtured them with the caring, non-judgmental mothering they'd been starved of. Eli in particular had a radical attitude shift, expressing remorse for how he used to treat me when blinded by Derek's constant put-downs. He started coming by the spa regularly to talk, to seek advice and life coaching as he tried to map out a better path than his father's toxic cycle. "I don't want to end up like that," he confided one afternoon, nodding toward a dive bar Derek could often be spotted drinking himself into an angry stupor at. what you did, getting out and standing up for yourself, it showed me a better way, you know? My heart swelled with love and pride for the thoughtful young man he was becoming. All the suffering and sacrifice had been worth it to extract my children from Derek's poisonous grip. Even Mia, who had been Derek's darling, reached out more and more, softening toward me and embracing the nurturing, feminine energy she had been starved of for so long. The four of us would sometimes go out for nice dinners or take little weekend trips, an activity Derek always used to dismiss as frivolous wastes of money. For the first time, there was real intimacy and bonding without his towering, fragile ego to walk on eggshells around. As the years went on, Derek's miserable story faded, while mine continued to blossom and thrive. My hard-won freedom, success, and strong family bonds were the ultimate victory, one I had paid dearly for, but ultimately proved worth every ounce of struggle and perseverance. At long last, I could put the nightmare behind me and simply bask in the warm glow of a rebirth earned through resilience, redemption, and the ultimate karmic justice served.